Hello YouTube, welcome back campaigners. Once again, this is Campaign Terrain and I'm your host, Cross. And today, we're going to finish out the house, the wall, and the ground around it. So, if you've been liking what I bring into you, like, share, and subscribe. Now's your chance. I'll see you after the bump. Thanks for coming. Okay, we're going to be sanding first, just to make sure that the paint will stick to it. If you're using the EPS, that's the white with the little beads in it, you probably don't want to sand it because it can tear the little beads off and leave it rough. It's already got a texture that the paint's the base coat and paint and various things will grab onto. So we're going to leave, if you've got this, leave it alone and don't sand it. The PIR foam, that's the other type of insulation that I started with the house. Do not sand this. You do not want this chemical anywhere near your lungs. You don't want it stuck on your hands, anything. And it's already got a kind of rough texture that'll hold the paint anyway. There's no need to. So if you're using the PIR, don't sand it. Leave it alone. So XPS, that's the pink stuff, the teal stuff, or the green, the blue stuff if you've got it, or if you're in Europe, the yellow stuff called Styrodur. Anything that's made out of styrene, that's the smooth type, you're going to want to sand. What we're trying to do is get what's called tooth, which is going to make the paint stick to it. So when you're sanding, you're going to want something fairly fine grit. You don't want something that's going to dig in and gouge. You just want to get just the surface roughed up so that the paint will stick. So I'd suggest something fairly fine, like a 150, 220. Anything more than that, anything that says like wet sanding or anything like that, that's way overkill. But something a little bit finer. You don't want your 60 grits and 80 grits. Okay, first, let's go ahead and take the borders off. Walls. Sand the entire surface of this, the floor, that's going to get everything. Now, for this, I'm actually using a sanding sponge. This comes from the Dollar Tree. It's got a rougher side, don't want to use that, and it's got a smoother side. We're going to use that. Oh, sorry, you probably don't want to hear that. We're going to use that and get all that down. Now, everything, no matter if you're doing the walls, the main walls, the house if you did it in XPS, or the floor, anything you sand, you're going to want to do in little small back and forths or circles. You don't want big long lines in it because it's going to show, it could potentially show through the paint and the grain. So you want to basically sand it like that. You want to go back and forth, trying not to leave any little trails in it. So let me go ahead and get down to one piece so that we have only one to concentrate on, and I'll show you the best ways I've found to sand it. Just one second. First things first, you're definitely going to wear a breather. I definitely suggest one of these ones with the filters on the side, but at least one of the little paper ones fits over your mouth and nose. Make sure it's as tight and snug as possible. Tape it down if you need to, or get one of these with the filter. Anytime you're sanding anything like this, you end up with all this little dust on here, and it gets into the air, and if it's in the air, it gets into your lungs. So you definitely want to wear a breather. Not a question, put it on. Okay, let me show you how we're going to do this. This one had a bunch of paint on it, and I've already taken that off. You want to do this in little small circles so that it doesn't leave lines. So we're going to go in little circles like that, or little back and forth motions. We don't want any big drag marks. As you can see, you can get most of the paint off just doing that because this paint is just superficial, and it's not vital that you get all of the paint off because the paint that we're going to put on it, the texture we're going to put on it, all that's going to be covered. It's not really going to show through, but if you want to, you can sand all of that down. Okay, now this is the bottom piece. You don't really need to sand that. This is the top edge. You don't need to sand that because when you cut it, it left it. Now, somehow my knife left a drag mark in it, so I'm going to sand this one a little, but I'm also rounding off the top edges. And the reason I'm doing that is the way these are designed, I would think that they have a little bit rounder tops to them. They certainly come on. You get to see them a lot that way in the desert Southwest in the United States. Some of the Middle Eastern countries, there's a little bit sharper edge right at the top of the wall. So the way these are made, I'm going to be showing you right here. I'm going to be putting some pictures up here of how these are made with Adobe, and they're either bricks that are put together out of Adobe bricks, or they're put together with slabs of Adobe mud, or they're just patted on together in layers until they build up to where they need them, and then they plaster over the outside. Now this does not generally provide a really sharp corner edge, so I'm going to go ahead and take that off so that that's sort of hidden, so that that's not there when I go to texture it. So I'm going to show you how I sand these. Now I'm going to be doing it over here on this edge for part of it so I can get it to lay flat, and you'll be able to see the motions I'm going in. I'll also be holding it in front of you. Once I'm done with that, you'll see a jump, and then I'll come back after these, the full frame and the ground are done. Now I don't have to sand my house because the type of foam it is. If I was sanding it, I would be doing that as well. So once I've got everything sanded, I'll be back. But don't forget, breather. For this step, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to want a base coat for whatever you want the undercoat of your sand desert dune color to look like. If you want a Martian one, that could be a dark red, a dark brown, black, dark gray. If you want something like the desert Southwest, you're probably going to want like a red or a terracotta, something like that for your base coat, but you want it to be your darkest color on the bottom. Now I am going for a color scheme I used before on some ruins, which is this one. And as you can see, those come out looking sort of yellow, sort of like the sepia washed out colors you used to see from ancient Egypt pictures when they were showing them. But that's actually not the color that it is in Egypt. But so that's what I'm going for, is this sort of yellowish, brownish look to it. So these are what I'm using as my examples. So I'm going to start with a brown base coat. Now this is my boom. That's the one I say it's called boom because the color is when everything starts to come together. The moment that paintbrush hits, boom. So I'm using brown. Now this is half PVA. That's your basic white glue. This is also half brown. This is not the darkest I've ever made it. You can make it darker if you want, but I'm wanting this to be a bit of, like I said, a light yellow color. So I'm not really going for a super, super dark base. So I'm going for the boom. Then you're going to want a texture in it. You want it to feel like sand or look like sand. Now, a lot of people use baking soda for that. I've got a whole video, hopefully I'll remember to link it up here, on textures, and you can use baking soda for that, but I am going to use my fine sifted sand. Now my sand, I can run it through the sifter like 3 different times and end up with 4 different grains. This is the finest I've got. Let me show you what we're working with here. As you see, that is a pretty fine grit of sand, and it doesn't look out of place with 25 and 28 and 32 millimeter figures. So we're going to add about 50-50 boom and sand, but we're going to add the sand as we need it to get to the texture we like, just where we can see it's gritty. We don't want it to be chunky. We want this to look like desert sand. So let me go ahead and take that. You want to add the boom first. Now you're going to want to rinse water. You're also going to want some big, nasty, stipply kind of brushes that you're not worried about hurting the bristles on. Probably need 1 or 2. You can even go bigger than this if you want. Now, I'm not going to be trying to get this same texture onto these rocks, but you can, because they're made out of essentially the same thing the sand is. So if they're gritty, that's fine. Though typically, once they're gritty, they become sand. So I'm not really going to paint those. I'll hit those with the boom by itself without the sand afterwards. So let me show you where we're going with texture here. Once again, I'm using my mixing stick. You can use anything to mix it up you want. I like this one because I can spin it. It works kind of like a blender. So just kind of figure out how much you're going to need for this whole board. That's probably way more than enough, but I wanted to make certain. So I've got the paint in there, and then just going to add the sand straight in. Ooh, probably want a breather on for that too. Okay, breather back on. Sorry about that, I'm going to be hard to hear for a minute. Now, you really want to go ahead and get this spread around. You don't want to miss any spots, so get this spread all over the place. Then once you get it where you want, you can see that this definitely leaves brush strokes. At that point, you're going to want to stipple it, and it's going to leave that texture into it. Now, if you want, you can thin it so it looks a little less gritty, or there's more distance between the granules. But like I said, this is going for that sort of red rock southwestern texture, but the yellow fantasy color. So I'm going to go ahead and spread this out a bit. Then once I'm done, I'll come back with some water and then sort of spread that in, and it'll smooth it out, and then I can stipple it on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that, leave the camera on for a minute. When it fades out, when I come back, I'll be painting the wall, or spackling the walls. So the painted texture goes on here, and the spackle will go on the walls. I'll show you that in just a minute. Okay, for the spackling, we're literally just going to spackle it on like you would with a real wall. We're just going to put the texture on like stucco and leave it there to dry. So, this is the cheapy stuff from the dollar store. This comes from Dollar Tree, and it's perfectly good. It's just comes out a little dry. So, you can add a little bit of water to it if you want, or you can use it as is if it's the one that works for you. Either way is fine. It's not very expensive to get the stuff from the hardware store, so I've got that as well. And as you see, it's a lot more liquidy, and that's fine. And all we're going to use to attach it is basically any trowel or flat tool. You could use a butter knife if that works for you. You could use a spatula, one of those plastic paint scrapers. You could use a metal paint scraper if you want. What I'm using are, again, from the Dollar Tree. They have a little paint set, and it comes with these tools for putting the paint in different textures onto your canvas, and I found that they work really well for working with spackling. So probably won't use this one for this. It's a little bit, there's no need, there's no little fine corners to go into. So just take you some of the spackle, and there's no easy way to keep your finger out of the way of this. I have yet to find that out. Now, if I was doing it and it was just sitting there and it was something heavy, I'd probably do that. But as light as that is, I have not found out really a way to do it. So all I'm going to do is keep a hold on it, and when I get to the end, where my thumb is right now, that's going to be the last place I do. So you want it to look like stucco, so you want wide, sweeping pieces like that, where it looks like somebody's put it on with a full-sized trowel. So again, I'm going to speed up the video for you, show you me putting this on here, and when it fades out, we'll come back and it'll be a few seconds for you guys and tomorrow for me, and I will have let the spackle and the texture paste I put on the previous step dry overnight. So see all this color that's coming off on the spackle? That's the residue from when I sanded, and that's fine. It'll work its way into the spackle. The spackle will still stick. For you on the other side of the pond, this is what you call filler. You know how this works. This is the stuff you use for filling little holes in walls. It's not really designed to be put on something as wide as this piece, but it'll work. Now, there will be some shrinkage, and if I will show you that tomorrow. I like the cracks in the wall, and I go back and I repair if it does. It doesn't always. If it does, I go back and I just put more spackle over it and make it look like a repair. I want it to look like that, because these walls on this particular build, they're going to be, if they were real, they'd be exposed to the desert winds, they'd be exposed to the blistering sun, they'd be exposed to below freezing temperatures at night. They don't stay looking pretty for long. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this. I'll speed up the video, and then I will see you again tomorrow for me with this and the floor, the base part, all dried out. Welcome to the world of tomorrow, by which I mean it's the next day. Okay, as you can see, I got a little bit of work to do before I get this brown up to this yellow. So we're trying to match this color. It's got the brown undertones. So this is going to have a yellow, then a tan, then a brown wash. Got a little piece of scrap cardboard, using this as a palette. The yellow I'm using today happens to be one called patio paint. It's for painting on terracotta, concrete, wood, whatever. But since this has the sand in it and coat over it, I'm going to go ahead and use this. This one happens to be by Deco Art. It's their patio paint line, and this one's called Sunflower Yellow. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. This is going to need about a 80 to 90% coverage on this. So I'm going to go ahead, just wet my brush a little. I don't want it dripping. Probably can't see that, but just dipping that in my paint water. Okay. Or in this case, you see by the color it's plaster water, but it's the same thing, or whatever. So, alright. Again, we want to avoid brush strokes, but I'm going to go ahead and get the coverage on first, and then bristle it once it's done. So, again, pretty close to full coverage on this. You can go ahead and get the rocks, you can get the sand, you can get all of it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this. I'm going to fast forward through this, give you a little music to listen to. Go ahead and get some yellow on this. Time to turn that yellow into a beige, make it match these bricks. For that, we're going to use Beachcomber Beige. We're going to do a true dry brush on this. We're barely going to get any paint on here at all, just enough to lighten it up. The camera shows this as really yellow, but it's not. It's toned down, and it's become kind of a nice, almost ochre color, but not dark ochre. So we're going to take the Beachcomber Beige and true dry brush. For this, I'm using a makeup brush. This is a cheapie from Dollar Tree, and you know how dry brush works, but just in case, I'm going to go ahead and tell you again. Put a little paint over here, put it on one side. That's going to be where I pull from. I'm going to wipe some paint off here. Then just to make sure, I'll test it on this other piece just to make sure that I've got almost no paint left in the brush. I do want it on all of the bristles though, so I want to go, I don't want to just tap in on the paint. I want to go straight in like this. Get some on all the bristles. Okay, then wipe most of that off. As you can see, there's a lot still in there, which is fine. There we go. Now we're starting to thin it out. Okay, obviously this is a dry brush. You do not want to wet your brush ahead. This is literally a dry brush. You can always test on, whoop, lost a bracelet. You can always test on another piece of cardboard, another piece of paper, paper towel, whichever you want. You can also test on your hand, but I think this is going to work for me. So then, this is it. We just smear it around until we get a much lighter color. Add a little more if you need. Okay, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to speed this up. Probably fade out here in a minute, and I'll show you what this is done like after it dries out. As you can see, it turned out pretty well. Got a pretty close match to my previous color. I knew I would. I was using basically the same shades. I'm not going to put a brown wash over this because the brown undercoat is coming through quite well, and these ruins look like they blend right in. They look like they may have been carved out of sandstone in the same desert. So keep in mind this is the platform that we made for the house. So the house will still fit in between these little rocks, but these are here. You can do this, you can play this in 100 different ways. So you could just have this be an oasis. You could set up, if you made like a little water hole, you could sit that in the middle, put some plants around it. You could do, you know, anything your imagination holds you to. But let me show you without anything in the way. This is what it looks like. Turned out pretty well. All right, let's go move on to the house. So let's get around to painting these. I've got the plaster slash filler slash spackle on here. I didn't do the bottom because I wanted to still be able to sit flat, so ignored that. And just covered all of the sides, including the ends. We're going to cover those up. Now, I want this to look like a creamy sort of plaster, so I'm actually going to use a very light color mixed of Beachcomber Beige and Snow White. So there's going to be in about, I'm going to start with the white, and I'm going to add just enough beige to where it darkens it down a tone from just a white into a cream. So go ahead and do that. Want that to smear around this. Now this is a full coating. We're going to cover any place where any foam showing through or anything like that. We're going to completely coat this. The plaster still wants to come off on this dust. We want all of that covered up. So this is going to be 100% coverage. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint this piece. And again, back to the music and fast forwarding for you. As you can see, all the plaster and paint made the house a lot tougher, much more stable on the table. Well, not on that, but a lot more sturdy. Now it's time to get a little stain on it. Stop it looking quite so new. For this, I'm going to use my regular brown wash, and it's floor polish and paint and water. But I'm going to be switching to a different formula soon because this one does settle out and you have to stir it up. When you stir it up, it gets lots of bubbles. The bubbles create weird textures. So I want to try to avoid that. Now, this, the only dirt it's going to have on it is where the sand is blown onto it and then washed off in the rain, or if the rain itself had dirt in it, things like that. So we're going to take the brown wash. We're going to get it super, super, super thinned out. So go ahead and pour a little bit in there, and I mean just a little. Yeah. Like I said, it settles out, so there's little chunks in there sometimes. So, like I said, I'm switching formulas soon, so don't pay attention to this one for just now. And we're going to take a little bit of water, and by quite a bit of water, and we're going to dilute that down even further. As you see, that is very dilute. That's hardly there at all. So get that mixed in, and as with most washes on most things, you can be pretty liberal with this. Just go ahead and smear it on there. I'm going to start with the sides first, so that on the top I can make sure to set it in a way that all of the liquid's going to run out. I don't want it to just settle in these corners. So Now, the acrylics can be reactivated by all this moisture, so you don't want to just smear it around and smear it around. You want to get it on there and then let it be. That's it. That side's done. Once I have everything else dried and then hit with the wash, I'll be back to show you the finished result at the end of the video. So I'll be right back with that. Give me just a sec. Well, there you have it, campaigners. The house, the wall, and the ground to sit it on. Been kind of a big build. Bit off a little more than I could chew this week. I should have done the house and the wall separate from the floor. Lessons were learned. Other than that, it turned out really well. I'm really happy with it. So this just goes to show you what a little perseverance and some very simple techniques and minimal materials can yield for you. If you've been liking the stuff I've been bringing to you, please like, share, and subscribe. Definitely share. Let people know. I know you have been because I keep getting more followers, which is awesome. Now, and I hate to do this, but I warned you on the episode 26 that I'd be having to do some monetization, so this is that talk. By next week, not today, but by next week, you can keep checking back during the week, but by next week, I will have a Patreon, a buymeacoffee.com, and some Amazon links. And I'll have all those set up and ready, but that's for next week. Meanwhile, enjoy the house, the wall, the taller wall, the extra wall segments, and I'll show you some more right after this that you can do with some simple additions just to spruce it up a bit. This is a very versatile set of pieces, and it should last you for years and help you in many, many, many games. I love you. My name's Cross. This has been Campaign Terrain, and until next time, I wish you luck in your campaign. Thanks for coming.